You're up in the sky, I'll carry you home.
Hey guys, how you going? What's going on? Yesterday I got a haircut. What do you think? Anyway, so we are walking through the Valley of Water in the Blue Mountains, New South Wales, Australia. And today I'm going to run a slightly different vlog to what I normally would. Today what I'm going to do is that I've deliberately not looked at all that many photos of this particular location, and what I'm going to do is run you through the complete kind of shooting process. So what I look for in compositions when I get there, the settings, and then the shooting itself. So if you do like it, make sure you click the like button, click the subscribe button, because there's going to be plenty more of these kind of videos coming up. I must say before we get there too, but most people say the best condition for waterfalls is on an overcast day, where I think the complete opposite. I don't necessarily want the sun to be smack bang high in the sky, but I reckon some sunlight peeking through some trees, some specular kind of highlights throughout the scene ends up making the scene look absolutely awesome. So I much prefer to come on a sunny-ish kind of day. Today we've got full sun, full blue skies, but we'll make it work anyway. So I think another really smart thing to remember too is to take into account the season that you're in. So in Australia, a lot of waterfalls don't run in the summer, so the best time to visit waterfalls is in the winter, when you get more rainfall, more water in the creeks above the waterfalls. Creates a much more exciting photo when there's more water in the waterfalls itself. I know it sounds kind of obvious, but even in the summer I try to visit waterfalls and 99% of the time I get disappointed. So I've only had a really quick glance at this waterfall, so let's walk around and see if I can find a composition, and I'll talk you through exactly what I'm looking for that particular composition. What I'm looking for here is a way to the base of the waterfall. 99% of the time I'll shoot from the base of the waterfall because it's kind of where it's most dynamic. You get some really nice kind of lines from rocks that it kind of falls around. It just creates a really nice image, in my opinion anyway. So I can see the waterfall now, so I'm gonna go through this little gap. Yeah, look at this. This is cool. So after a really quick look around, I see a few different things. So the first thing I see is this rock here. So I think a composition in front of that rock, using the rock as kind of a leading line, which leads you into the waterfall. Another one I see is if we get up to this kind of little platform here, we might be able to see up more through the canyon, which could create this kind of really nice area to be able to put some really nice light. And we can either edit that in post, or it can already be in there from the light in the sky. So I guess in a way this is kind of why I like to shoot in the sunlight over an overcast day, because it'll create these really nice beams of light coming through, you know, certain areas like up in this canyon here. So what I've done here behind me is that I've set my camera up in the sand. And the main thing to remember when you're setting up in the sand is I always push the tripod down as hard as I can into the sand. That's for a few reasons. One, so it stays nice and stable throughout the longer exposures, and two, so it doesn't fall over on me and then your camera ends up in the water, and you know, that's kind of the last thing you want when you're shooting waterfalls. What I've realised from this composition is I need to be about another 2 foot out. So what I'm probably going to have to do is take my shoes off and get into the water. I like to try to avoid this as much as I can, and I keep saying to myself I should get some really high gum boots, but I haven't got them yet, so it looks like I'm getting in the water. Okay, cool, so I've snapped off a couple of shots. My main exposure now, and I figured that out through just a few experimental shots, is I've got 100 ISO, I've got f11, and I've got 20 seconds at the moment. I'm 99% happy with that exposure value. So let's jump into the composition and I'll show you exactly what I'm doing and my thought process behind the composition. So thinking about this composition, I'll chuck the image up on the screen now, and all this is a raw image, and I'll explain to you exactly what I'm doing compositionally. So the main thing that annoys me about this composition at the moment is that I've got some darker rocks at the bottom of the composition. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pan up slightly and retake the shot. With the composition, I've removed the dark rocks off the bottom, and now all we've got is that nice leading line of the moss covered rocks, which leads you perfectly into the waterfall. The next thing that I want to do is I want to close the gap between the moss covered rock and the waterfall itself. So I'm going to move the camera slightly to the left, which will kind of close the gap up and just create a slightly tighter image. Compositionally was I wanted to experiment with stepping back slightly and trying a slightly longer lens. So I've zoomed into 14mm on my 10 to 24mm Fujinon lens. The best thing about using a slightly longer lens length is it compresses down the perspective. So the foreground rock will appear closer to the waterfall than it did before. Thinking about it, I think I'm going to stick with the original shot at 10mm, but what I'm going to try to do is come in closer to the rock so that the foreground rock appears like it's further away from the waterfall than it did before. So one last final adjustment to this shot is I'm going to move slightly to the right, which will separate out the waterfall again. But what it'll do in the composition, it will remove a small amount of the green mossy rock, and it'll become a slightly less distracting element within the scene. So after about 15 minutes at this waterfall, I've got my first shot. Super happy with the final result. After a little bit of editing, this is what the image will look like. The most about this image is it's a perfect way to demonstrate a left to right composition. So I always try to teach people that the best way to compose an image is left to right. So when we write on a page, we write left to right. When we write an email, we write left to right. So I normally try to compose images left to right because I think that that's the way that we would normally read the image. What I also love about this image is it's got a perfect leading line in the foreground, which points the viewer straight into the waterfall. And with a tiny bit of editing, I've actually put a small amount of light up the top of the image, which balances out this image perfectly. Finally, settings-wise, I've used the longer shutter to create that dreamy looking water. I've also used it to blur out the water in the foreground. There's nothing too exciting happening in the foreground, so I feel that having a really smooth water just creates this really nice feel. Bye-bye, waterfall. Anyway, I hope you really liked that short tutorial. If you did like it, make sure you give it a big thumbs up. Make sure you click the subscribe button as well. Also, chuck a comment in the comment section below about what waterfall I should visit next. If you aren't already, make sure you follow me on Instagram. That's where I put all my photos. And until next time, I'll catch you later.